On a cold evening in Islamabad, long before the world knew his name, a terrified woman walked into the American embassy with a secret that could have changed history. She wasn't an informant or an intelligence operative. She was the wife of an American-Pakistani man who was traveling too often, meeting dangerous people, and planning things she couldn't fully understand. She told American officials that her husband had been meeting Lashkar-e-Taiba commanders, that he spoke obsessively about India. She even showed them photographs of their stay at the Taj Hotel in Mumbai and warned that he was plotting something big. However, this wasn't the only warning. His other wife had approached US authorities too, yet the warnings went nowhere. Files were opened but then quietly closed. Had the alarms been acted upon, Mumbai might have been saved. On the morning of 26 November every year, Mumbai wakes up with a quiet heaviness. Sirens fade into memory. Footsteps echo in empty corridors of the Taj Hotel, CST Terminus and Nariman House. But behind the 10 Lashkar terrorists who unleashed complete mayhem over 3 days lies a far darker story. A story of a man who held strong hatred towards India long before he ever walked into Mumbai. A man who used his American passport as a weapon. A man who lived 2 lives as a US intelligence asset and as Pakistan's most dangerous spy. In this video, we dive deep into the world of David Coleman Headley, aka Daood Gilani, the man who mapped Mumbai's destruction. And we uncover the duplicity of American intelligence, the cover-ups, the warnings that were ignored, and the questions that still remain unanswered. David Headley was born in 1960 in Washington, D.C. to a Pakistani father and an American mother. His father, Syed Salim Gilani, was a well-known Pakistani diplomat, while his mother, Alice Headley, worked as a secretary at the Pakistani embassy in Washington. Shortly after Headley was born, his family left the United States and settled in Lahore, Pakistan. Headley's mother was unable to adapt to Pakistani culture and after getting a divorce returned to the US, while Headley grew up in Pakistan. He was raised in a politically charged environment, steeped in Pakistani nationalism and Islamic fundamentalism, both of which were amplified by Pakistan's tensions with India. His first brush with radicalism didn't come from ideology, but it came from trauma. During the India-Pakistan War of 1971, Indian bombs hit Headley's elementary school in Karachi. He later spoke about the loss of a childhood friend and the destruction of familiar spaces that once felt safe. For a young boy, this war was not just a headline, it was an emotional trigger. This early trauma of a broken family and childhood loss hardened him. It planted the first seeds of bitterness. It shaped a worldview where India became the perceived enemy. So long before he joined Lashkar-e-Taiba, the foundations of his hatred were already being cemented. Headley then went on to attend a military prep school in Pakistan, and this is where he befriended Tahir Hussain Rana, a key co-conspirator of the 26/11 attacks. By the 1980s, Headley had drifted into drug addiction and was caught trafficking heroin by the US authorities. And that could have been the end of his story, but fate handed him a different script. Instead of serving a long prison sentence, he was given an offer he couldn't refuse: to work as an informant for the Drug Enforcement Administration, or the DEA. This was the turning point. America thought it had found a cooperative asset, but what they didn't realize was that they had created a double-edged weapon, a man who would soon manipulate both sides for his own agenda. All the intelligence training, the operational exposure, and the American protection, all of it made him even more dangerous. As a DEA informant with good contacts in Pakistan, The Americans sent him on multiple trips to the AF-Pak region, the Golden Crescent region, to infiltrate drug cartels, and he proved to be a valuable asset. But then came the 9/11 attacks and America's war on terrorism. The CIA desperately needed high-value assets in the region as they sought to target Al-Qaeda and the Taliban. When the CIA learned that the DEA had been working an American-Pakistani for years and that he had built a good ground network, they loaned him from the DEA, and just like that, Headley was now a CIA asset. Headley's first mission was to go back to Pakistan and infiltrate Lashkar-e-Taiba, which had come under CIA's crosshairs for its close links to Al-Qaeda and Osama bin Laden. As Headley was working his way through these two terror groups, he came under the radar of the Pakistani intelligence establishment. Parallelly, the Pakistani deep state had already set the 26/11 plan in motion. A senior ISI operative, known by his cover name Major Iqbal, was secretly colluding with Hafiz Saeed and Zakiur Rahman Lakwi from the LET to hit India's financial nerve center with an unprecedented attack. But they needed a man on the ground for target reconnaissance, route mapping, and logistics. Someone who could sneak in and out of India without raising red flags. Enter David Headley. Major Iqbal was convinced that David Headley would be the perfect operative for this mission. His Western appearance, with a Western-sounding name and an American passport, made him an elite catch for the ISI. Headley grabbed this offer by the ISI and saw this as an opportunity to hit back at India for all his childhood trauma. And thus, he set out to Muridke, the Lashkar headquarters. Lashkar trained him in surveillance, counter-surveillance, clandestine communication, sea route mapping, combat basics, and he came under the supervision of Sajid Mir, one of Lashkar's most feared handlers, with close links to the ISI. Headley wasn't just a foot soldier. He was a specialist, a spy, a weapon. Between 2006 and 2008, Headley made 5 trips to Mumbai. He checked into 5-star hotels. He mingled with the elite. He even made friends. He blended in like a perfect covert operative. He never came under Indian surveillance or raised any red flags. Headley meticulously mapped out the entry-exit routes, security deployments, choke points, high-value civilian areas. He filmed the Taj, Oberoi Trident Hotel, CST Terminus, Nariman House, Leopold Cafe, and even the landing spots along the shoreline. One chilling detail that's rarely discussed is that Headley had created a full digital simulation of the targets for Lashkar's training. The terrorists practiced the assault using this very footage, frame by frame. Every bullet fired in Mumbai during those 3 fateful days, every explosion detonated, and every life taken was made possible because of David Headley. He wasn't just an accomplice, he was the architect of this assault. But David Headley didn't operate alone. His longtime friend Tahvur Rana, a former Pakistani army doctor with links to the ISI, ran an immigration firm in Chicago. Using this office, Rana provided Headley with business cover, fake documents, travel support, and a legitimate facade. Rana's company gave Headley the credibility that he needed to enter India repeatedly without suspicion. Now let's talk about the American duplicity that almost feels like a betrayal. This is where the story gets uncomfortable. From 2001 to 2008, multiple warnings were sent to American agencies, including by Headley's own wives, that he was training with extremists and planning something big in India. Despite this, the US failed to act and provided India with only partial intelligence before the attacks. The American alerts were quite specific. It warned India of a seaborne attack on Mumbai, most likely the Taj Hotel. But they did not reveal a crucial detail. That is the identity and role of David Headley. which could have probably helped India to prevent the attack. But this was carefully concealed by the CIA. Even after the 26/11 attacks, the US did not share this information with India and only arrested him when he was planning another attack in Denmark almost a year later. Even the cooperation US gave after the attacks was primarily because Western passport holders and the Jewish Chabad house had been targeted by the Lashkar. This tragic episode highlights the consequences of withholding critical intelligence during counter-terrorism efforts and the ruthless world of espionage. US agencies, they had every chance to flag him, detain him, and hand him over to India to help prevent the attack. But they did not. Why? Because Headley was useful to them, because he had deep ties with Lashkar, access to the inner circles of the ISI. He had valuable intelligence to offer on Afghanistan and Pakistan. So as long as he served American interests, they conveniently looked the other way. After 26/11, instead of handing him to India, the US did the opposite. They entered into a plea bargain, which essentially guarantees no extradition, no death penalty, and controlled disclosures of his statements. But the big question is, why would US protect him now? Because Headley probably knew too much about Lashkar, about ISI, and perhaps about America's own covert operations. He was not just a terrorist anymore. He had now become a liability for the Americans. In a recent development, after years of diplomatic pressure, the US has finally extradited Daood Rana to India. It's a significant victory, but still only half the battle is won, as the bigger conspirator remains sheltered in the US. The US government argues that Headley cooperated, he helped us, he gave us intelligence. But how does this outweigh the death of 166 innocent people? How does this justify immunity? Justice cannot be selective, morality cannot be convenient. If other allies can extradite terrorists for crimes committed abroad, why is David Headley off limits? Why does Washington preach counter-terrorism abroad but shelter a key conspirator of India's version of 9/11? On this anniversary, we must remember the heroes of 26/11. Tukaram Omble, Major Sandeep Unni Krishnan, Hemant Karkare, Ashok Kamte, Vijay Salaskar, and the other first responders, along with innocent civilian lives that ended too soon. But remembrance is incomplete without accountability. Daood Rana has been extradited to India, so now it's time for David Coleman Headley to face justice. He cannot be allowed to hide behind a plea bargain, not when his actions tore apart families and reshaped India's history. So if you believe India deserves justice, if you believe no terrorist should escape accountability, if you believe the victims of 26/11 deserve closure, raise your voice, share this video, tag the official handles of the US Embassy, the State Department, the White House, and if required, POTUS himself, and demand David Headley's extradition to India. Because the powerful only listen when the masses speak up. Thanks for watching.